The restaurant owner looked at the young black man standing at his door, still wearing his Olympic jacket, with the USA emblem gleaming under the afternoon sun. "I don't care if you're the president," the owner sneered. "We don't serve your kind here." What he didn't know was that he was talking to Cassius Clay, who had just won Olympic gold for America. And what happened in the next 6 hours would lead to one of the most powerful protests in sports history, a moment that would transform a champion into an activist forever. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story of the greatest facing his country's ugliest truth, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. If you believe that real patriotism means standing up against injustice in your own country, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove sometimes the bravest fight isn't in the ring. It's against the system itself. Now, let's get into what really happened when Cassius Clay came home to Louisville in September 1960, and everything changed. The Greyhound bus rolled into Louisville, Kentucky, just after noon, on a warm September afternoon. 18-year-old Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. pressed his face against the window, watching the familiar streets come into view. Around his neck hung the Olympic gold medal he'd won in Rome just 3 days earlier, the light heavyweight championship that had made him a national hero overnight. Cassius wore his red USA Olympic team jacket with pride, the white stars and stripes prominent on the chest. His face showed the boyish excitement of someone who believed the world had finally opened up for him. He'd conquered Rome, charmed the international press, and stood on that podium while the Star-Spangled Banner played. For 18 glorious days, he'd been treated like royalty, not as a black man, but as an American champion. The bus pulled into the station, and Cassius grabbed his duffel bag, the gold medal swinging against his chest. He couldn't wait to show everyone in his neighborhood that a kid from the West End could conquer the world. His mother had promised to cook his favorite meal. His father had told everyone in town that his boy was coming home a champion. But what Cassius didn't know was that his medal meant nothing here. The Louisville he'd left 6 weeks ago was the same Louisville that had always existed. A city where whites-only signs hung on restaurant doors, where black citizens couldn't sit at lunch counters, where swimming pools closed rather than integrate. Being an Olympic hero didn't change the color of your skin. Cassius walked through downtown Louisville with his head high, the medal catching sunlight and turning heads. White people stared, some with curiosity, some with hostility, none with the respect he'd received in Rome. A few asked to see the medal. One elderly white woman touched it gently and said, "That's real nice, boy." The word boy stung, but Cassius smiled anyway. He was home. He was a champion. Things would be different now. By mid-afternoon, Cassius was hungry. He'd been traveling for 18 hours, and the excitement had burned through the sandwich his mother packed. He found himself on 4th Street, standing in front of a restaurant called the Blue Room, a popular diner known for its burgers and milkshakes. Cassius had walked past the Blue Room 1,000 times growing up. He'd always wanted to eat there, to sit at those shiny chrome stools, to order a burger like the white kids did. But he'd never been allowed. The sign in the window made it clear: "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Everyone knew what that meant. But today was different. Today, Cassius Clay was an Olympic gold medalist. Today, he represented America on the world stage. Today, surely, the rules would bend. That's when everything changed. Cassius pushed open the glass door, and a small bell chimed. The restaurant was half full, mostly white customers enjoying late lunches. The smell of grilled meat and fresh coffee filled the air. Conversations stopped. Heads turned, every eye fixed on the young black man in the Olympic jacket. Behind the counter stood Frank Morrison, the owner, a thick-necked man in his 50s, with graying hair and permanent scowl lines. Morrison had run the Blue Room for 20 years and had never served a black customer. Not once, and he wasn't about to start. Olympic medal Or not. Can I help you? Morrison asked, his tone making it clear that helping was the last thing he intended to do. Cassius smiled, the same charming smile that had won over reporters in Rome. Yes, sir. I'd like a hamburger, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake, please. Morrison looked at the medal around Cassius's neck, then back at his face. Sorry, we don't serve Negros here. There's a place down on Ninth Street that'll take care of you. The words hit Cassius like a physical blow. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just heard. He touched the medal on his chest, as if reminding Morrison and himself that this changed things. Sir, I just won this for my country. I represented the United States of America in Rome. I won the gold medal. Morrison's expression didn't change. That's real nice. But we still don't serve your kind. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave before there's trouble. The restaurant fell completely silent. At a booth near the window sat Jerry Wilson, a Korean War veteran. He'd been eating lunch when Cassius walked in. Wilson looked up, his jaw tight with anger, not at Cassius, but at what he was witnessing. Frank, Wilson called out. That kid just won a gold medal for this country? You really going to turn him away? Morrison's face reddened. Jerry, you know the rules. This ain't got nothing to do with his medal. It's about maintaining standards. This is a white establishment. Standards? Wilson stood up, his chair scraping loudly. I fought in Korea next to black soldiers. Some of them saved my life. And you're telling me this kid, who just made America proud, can't eat a hamburger in his own hometown? Morrison pointed toward the door. If you don't like how I run my restaurant, you're welcome to leave too. Cassius held up his hand. It's okay, sir. I don't want to cause trouble. But his voice cracked slightly, betraying the pain he was trying to hide. But nobody was prepared for what happened next. A young waitress named Lucy Peterson, 19 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, walked over from behind the counter. She'd been watching the whole scene, her face growing red with embarrassment and shame. Mr. Morrison, Lucy said quietly, I saw this boy on television. He won that medal, fighting for our country. It doesn't seem right. Lucy, get back to work, Morrison snapped. This doesn't concern you. But it does concern me, Lucy said, her voice stronger now. My brother is in the army right now, defending this country. And if he came home and saw us treating an Olympic champion like this, he'd be ashamed. Morrison's face turned purple with rage. You got something to say about how I run my business? I can find another waitress real quick. Lucy looked at Cassius, then back at Morrison. For a long moment, she stood there, weighing her job against her conscience. Finally, she untied her apron and set it on the counter. I quit, she said simply. Then she walked over to Cassius and extended her hand. I'm sorry for how you've been treated here. You deserved better. Cassius shook her hand, tears forming in his eyes, despite his efforts to hold them back. Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know. Lucy walked out of the blue room, leaving her job behind. Jerry Wilson threw money on his table and walked out too. Within minutes, 3 other customers left in protest, leaving Morrison standing behind his counter, his face twisted with anger and stubbornness. Cassius stood there for another moment, looking around the restaurant that had rejected him. The medal around his neck suddenly felt heavy, not with pride, but with the weight of broken promises. He turned and walked out into the bright Louisville afternoon. The walk home was the longest of Cassius's life. He didn't take the direct route. Instead, he wandered through downtown Louisville, looking at the city with new eyes. Every whites only sign seemed to scream at him. Every restaurant window felt like a barrier. The medal around his neck, which had felt so important in Rome, now felt like a cruel joke. Cassius found himself at the 2nd Street Bridge, which spanned the Ohio River between Louisville and Indiana. He'd crossed this bridge 1,000 times, had trained by running across it countless mornings before dawn. Now he stood at the railing, looking down at the brown water flowing below. His mind replayed the scene at the Blue Room, over and over. The contempt in Morrison's voice, the humiliation of being turned away, the kindness of strangers who'd stood up for him. A kindness that somehow made the rejection hurt even more, because it proved not everyone was filled with hate, which meant the hate was a choice. Cassius pulled the medal from around his neck and held it in his hand. The gold caught the late afternoon sun, glinting with the same brightness it had on the Olympic podium. He remembered standing there in Rome, hand over his heart while the anthem played, believing he'd won something more than a medal, believing he'd won respect, dignity, proof of his worth as an American. Then he did something that would become legendary. Two young black men were walking across the bridge when they noticed Cassius standing at the railing. One of them, Marcus Johnson, recognized him immediately. "Hey, aren't you Cassius Clay, the Olympic boxer?" Cassius turned, his face streaked with tears. He hadn't realized he'd shed. "Yeah, that's me." Marcus and his friend rushed over, excited to meet their hometown hero. "Man, we saw you on TV. You were incredible. The whole neighborhood has been talking about you coming home." Cassius tried to smile but couldn't. "Y'all want to see my medal? Are you kidding?" "Of course." Cassius held it out, letting them examine it, feel its weight. "You know what this medal means?" he asked quietly. Marcus looked confused. "It means you're the best in the world." "No," Cassius said, his voice hardening with a bitter edge. "It means nothing. I just got kicked out of a restaurant downtown. They wouldn't serve me because I'm black. This medal didn't matter. Being an Olympic champion didn't matter. None of it mattered." The two friends exchanged glances. They'd lived in Louisville their whole lives. They knew exactly what Cassius was talking about, but somehow, hearing it from someone who just represented America in front of the entire world made it hurt fresh and new. "Which restaurant?" Marcus asked, anger rising in his voice. "The Blue Room, on 4th Street. "Man, forget them," his friend said. "You don't need their restaurant. You're Cassius Clay. You're a champion." Cassius looked down at the medal in his hand, then out at the Ohio River flowing beneath the bridge. "You know what I realized today? This medal is a lie. It represents a country that doesn't exist, a country that treats everyone equally, that respects you for what you achieve instead of how you look. That country is a fantasy." What he did next shocked everyone watching. Cassius drew his arm back and hurled the gold medal as far as he could. It spun through the air, catching sunlight one last time before splashing into the Ohio River and disappearing beneath the brown water. Marcus and his friend gasped, unable to believe what they'd just witnessed. "Man, why'd you do that?" Cassius watched the spot where the medal had vanished, his face a mixture of pain, anger, and something that looked like freedom. "Because I'm done pretending. I'm done believing that if I just work hard enough, if I just prove myself enough, if I just win enough, then America will finally accept me." That medal was supposed to mean I'd made it, but all it really meant was that I was still just another black man who couldn't eat at a white restaurant in his own hometown. The three young men stood on the bridge as the sun began to set over Louisville. Cars passed behind them, people going about their lives, unaware that they were witnessing a moment that would change one young man's life forever. "What are you going to do now?" Marcus asked quietly. Cassius was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new quality, not the playful braggadocio he'd always used, but something deeper, harder, more resolved. "I'm going to keep fighting. But not just in the ring. I'm going to fight the system that says a gold medal doesn't matter if the person wearing it has black skin. I'm going to fight the lie that America is free when half its citizens can't eat at a restaurant. I'm going to fight until things change, really change, not just on paper but in reality. Marcus put his hand on Cassius's shoulder. That's a big fight, man. Bigger than any boxing match. I know, Cassius said. But someone has to do it. And if Olympic champions won't stand up, who will? The three men walked off the bridge together as darkness fell over Louisville. That night, Cassius sat at his mother's dinner table, surrounded by family and neighbors who'd come to celebrate. They asked to see his medal, and Cassius told them he'd lost it. He didn't tell them the truth. Not yet. The wound was too fresh, too raw. But his mother, Odessa, knew her son. She saw the change in his eyes, the hardness that hadn't been there when he'd left for Rome. After everyone had gone home, she sat beside him on the porch. "What happened today, baby?" she asked gently. Cassius told her everything. The Blue Room, Morrison's rejection, Lucy quitting her job, Wilson's protest, and finally, throwing the medal into the river. When he finished, his mother pulled him close, and for the first time since he was a child, Cassius Clay cried in his mother's arms. "I thought winning that medal would change things," he said through tears. "I thought if I made America proud, they'd finally see me as equal. But it didn't matter, Mama. None of it mattered." Odessa held her son and let him grieve. Not for the medal, but for the innocence he'd lost. For the country he'd believed in, that didn't truly exist for people who looked like him. "I know, baby," she whispered. "I know it hurts. But don't let them break you. Don't let their hatred turn you into someone you're not. Use this pain. Let it fuel you to fight for something bigger than boxing. You were always meant for more than just winning medals." Those words would echo in Cassius's mind for the rest of his life. The story of the thrown medal would remain mostly unknown for years. Cassius rarely talked about it. And when he did, people didn't believe it. It seemed too dramatic, too symbolic to be true. But decades later, the witnesses who'd been there, Marcus Johnson, the protesters who'd walked out of the Blue Room, would confirm every detail. That night on the 2nd Street Bridge, the Olympic champion Cassius Clay began his transformation into Muhammad Ali, the activist who would risk everything to fight for justice. The thrown medal became a symbol of something profound, the realization that symbols mean nothing without substance, that patriotism without equality is hypocrisy, and that sometimes you have to reject the system's rewards to expose its lies. Lucy Peterson, the waitress who quit her job, would later become active in the civil rights movement, inspired by what she'd witnessed. Jerry Wilson never ate at the Blue Room again and became a vocal supporter of integration. And Frank Morrison, his restaurant eventually closed in 1967, a victim of changing times and a community that finally decided discrimination was bad for business. But the most important change happened inside Cassius Clay himself. The boy who'd returned from Rome, believing America would embrace its Olympic hero, learned a brutal lesson about the difference between symbolic acceptance and real equality. That lesson would shape every decision he made, from changing his name to refusing the draft, from speaking out against racism to sacrificing his career for his principles. Because that's what happened when America broke a young champion's heart. It created an activist who would never stop fighting. Years later, when Muhammad Ali was asked about the greatest fight of his life, he never mentioned Sonny Liston or George Foreman. He talked about the fight for dignity, for justice, for the right to be treated as a human being regardless of race. And it all began on that September afternoon in 1960. When an Olympic gold medalist learned that in his own country, his medal meant nothing compared to the color of his skin. The gold medal at the bottom of the Ohio River became a powerful metaphor, a rejection of empty symbols and a demand for real change. And the young man who threw it away became the greatest not just because of his boxing skills, but because he understood that true championship means fighting for something bigger than yourself, even when the whole world tells you to stay quiet and be grateful for the scraps they offer.